Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark the Liberty, and joining me today is...
Corey 8-function rechargeable bullet knockreiner.
The heck?
We all have 8-function rechargeable bullet things from Spencer, right?
Ah, okay. I get it now. Yep. On today's episode, we will be discussing an IoT device that Corey is heavily hinting at delivering malware onto people's computers. Before that, though, we'll cover the latest international law enforcement takedown of a major cybercrime organization. And we will end with some new rules and regulations coming down to the maritime industry to help with cybersecurity. With that, let's go ahead and let's sail our way in.
Let's shake our way in.
Tactfully
you could
avoid.
say even vibrate our way in, Mark.
So last week, there were a couple big news stories, I guess. And there was one really big one that came out first, where an international effort led by the US and the UK primarily successfully disrupted the LockBit ransomware group. So the DOJ, the US DOJ, says that LockBit, they've targeted more than 2,000 victims worldwide, taken over $120 million in ransom payments. And as part of the takedowns, the FBI, in partnership with international law enforcement agencies, were able to take over a whole bunch of LockBit's assets, which included decryption keys as well.
By the way, we love the FBI. Love is a strong word. We like national authorities that are doing something with crimeware. But in this case, I want to say I don't know if you have any insider stuff on this, but my understanding is the NCA led on this, the
Nice.
UK team. So I think in all of these, the Five Eyes are very cooperative in doing these takedowns together. And since these ransomware, cyber threats affect every country. So you'll often see releases like ones we've participated in the past where maybe the FBI led with us, but other organizations were involved. But in this one, while I definitely want to give the FBI credit for all the things they did, I feel like the NCI might have led on, or NCA, which is a UK organization, led on this. Not 100%
Doesn't
sure,
matter.
though. They
America
don't share
first.
that detail. Okay. I won't comment on
I'm
that.
totally kidding. Yep. Either way, so the effort, they were able to gain decryption keys. They gained 200 cryptocurrency accounts related to LockBit. And they overall took over 34 servers spread across Europe, the US, and Australia. If you went to go visit LockBit's dark web websites, you were greeted with a notice that they had been seized by law enforcement. And my favorite bit, actually, is the FBI and the NCA actually defaced LockBit's affiliate portals. So where LockBit ransomware as a service customers, quote unquote, go to log in to manage their platform. And they added this message. It says, hello, and it inserts their username. Law enforcement has taken control of LockBit's platform and obtained all of the information held on there. This information relates to the LockBit group and you, their affiliate. We have source code, details of the victims you have attacked, and the amount of money extorted, the data stolen, chats, and much, much more. You can thank LockBit's up and their flawed infrastructure for this situation. We may be in touch with you very soon. If you would like to contact us directly, please get in touch. And they had a contact link. In the meantime, we encourage you to visit the LockBit leak site. Have a nice day. Regards, the National Crime Agency of the US, the FBI, Europol, and Operation Kronos Law Enforcement Task Force.
By the way, one of the things you notice, I don't know, is getting enough headlines, but you can, if you're on the YouTube version, you can see the video here. Notice with ransomware authors, the quote unquote malicious agreement is pay the ransom and we'll delete your data and you'll be fine. But notice in that big thing that they defaced their website with, they also mentioned we have the data you took. And it turns out that the data was still there for past victims, maybe some who have actually paid. So if you ever wonder if these criminals that are stealing your data that you're paying ransomware are actually good guys and will actually remove your data and not extort you again, well, apparently, according to the NCA, the people that got these servers, your data is still there. They did not delete it. So just something to think about when you think about paying ransom.
I am, for one, so massively shocked at that revelation.
Yeah, I know. Who would have thought that you couldn't trust them?
My God. Uh, if you were a LockBit victim, by the way, so the FBI and the NCA were able to get the decryption keys, and they even spun up lockbitvictims.ic3.gov, where you can reach out to the FBI and potentially gain access to a key to decrypt all of your data. So after the takedown, that wasn't the end of the news. In fact, this operation is still apparently ongoing. They just also announced they at least 3 affiliates were arrested in Poland and the Ukraine as part of a international takedown. It was like a father-son duo in the Ukraine and a single dude in Poland that were LockBit affiliates in this case. When it comes to LockBit leadership, the U.S. Department of Justice is now offering a $15 million cash reward for information leading to the arrest or conviction of anyone participating in the LockBit group, or information leading to the identification or location of the leaders of the group. They have already unsealed some indictments against 2 LockBit members. There was 2 Russian nationals, Artur Sungatov and Ivan Kondratiev. Oh, I butchered it, but I don't care. They suck. The second one is possibly more infamously known by their hacker handle, Basterlord. So the story isn't even entirely over. So there's a popular kind of intermediary between the white hat, gray hat world and the underground. They go by the persona VX Underground on the site formerly known as Twitter. And they claim they've even been in contact with some of the folks at LockBit. They said that LockBit's claiming that really the FBI only compromised servers that were running PHP, and that they're arresting innocent people. They claim that the rest of their infrastructure is basically unharmed, and they'll be back online in a relatively short order. So either way, though, like it's another one of those. It's technically a disruption campaign. They'll be out of commission for a little bit. I think the big part of this, though, is this has to have the affiliates a bit spooked, hopefully, and I think that's one good way to slow down ransomware. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely spooking. That I mean, I think they trolled them very well with that deface, as you pointed out, and that would scare the heck out of me if I were a criminal actor that had been using that framework to steal money. I also think that there's already stories which we will partially agree with that this disruption doesn't make all the criminals go away. They will rebuild somewhere else, but they got like 200 crypto wallets. I think whether or not they're able to arrest every single one of these bad guys, they took their wallets, many of their wallets. As long as they're getting some of the wallets of the big people, like this big guy that I'm not even, it's not worth remembering his name or alias because he's a horrible, crappy person. But he's already like threatening to rebuild and everything will be fine. I don't care. Just take more of his money. And that I think the FBI realizes in these international cases, especially when a lot of these folks use safe havens for cybercrime like Russia to hide from extradition, taking all their money is a good way to kind of screw them and maybe make them think twice. I mean, I'd rather them be in jail, but if you're at least getting to their money, even if they can rebuild, you're just making it much harder for them to continue actually profiting from this kind of crappiness.
And if you aren't in a safe haven, like it's clear that you are up for grabs for arrest, like going after folks in Poland and Ukraine for this. It is good to see us catching criminals and hopefully holding them accountable for their actions. But I think, like you said, even if this does temporarily disrupt LockBit, I don't expect them to fully go away. But it will hopefully put at least a little damper on the uptick, because it's been one of the most, if not the most prolific ransomware operator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this was big. It got children's, it got hospitals, it got millions from many people. I mean, you said the number 120 million. I'm sure Ryan, one of our team's ransomware primary malware analysts, could tell you how much LockBit was all over our endpoint detections. And his research. So it's great news, even if some of them do sneak away and rebuild. I think you've actually put a big bruise on their organization.
Yep. And remember, kids, crime doesn't pay unless you live in Russia, in which case, whatever.
And crime doesn't pay, at least not after the authorities seize your online cryptocurrency wallets.
Yep. So, anyways, moving on, Corey, I've got a fun story for you for this next one. So
Why?
this started
Why
with
for me? Don't place this
okay,
on
maybe
me,
not
Mark.
you specifically, but
Even if I
I
did
think we'll all
Teams
find
it when I
enjoyment out of
first
this one.
saw it, because it's quite interesting. It's not our
Hey,
first.
so this one started, and I want to preface this by saying the toothbrush story has me being skeptical over any IoT related incident whatsoever. But it turns out this one's actually got
This
truth
has
to it.
evidence.
So a Reddit user earlier this last week posted a thread, which has now since been deleted, describing a interesting malware installation vector that they encountered over the weekend. So they said they went to the Spencer's store in one of their local malls. If you're not from America, Spencer's is a store that sells all sorts of interesting, like punk and niche merchandise. And they at the store purchased a adult sex toy. And that toy had a USB port in it to charge its battery. And so they just pulled it out of the packaging, plugged it in their computer to charge it. And when they went to open their web browser, a file instantly downloaded without them opening any pages. And their endpoint protection, in this case, Malwarebytes, flagged it as malware. So my initial I went and got a copy of the malware and confirmed it was like actually like malicious. They shared the name of it. It was pretty easy to find on VirusTotal. I think they even shared the URL. That's how I ended up getting it because it was still live. But so Malwarebytes actually came out and said, yeah, this is actually real. They took a look at their telemetry on the back end and they posted a blog post of their analysis of this threat. And it's actually pretty interesting once you get past the delivery method, even. So they confirmed that the malware was actually the infamous info stealer called Llama. Llama operates as a malware as a service model where cyber criminals can pay for access to the software and the infrastructure and then deploy it to victims and reap the benefits. It's primarily steals information from like cryptocurrency wallets and also browser extensions and credentials stored within your web browser as well. So for the technical details, they said the flash drive hosted a series of whole bunch of XML files and a MSI file called Mia Khalifa 18.msi. The XML files appear to be a XML bomb. It's similar to a zip bomb, where it's designed to like crash the web application if it tries to decompress it. They surmise that it's probably to draw attention away from the actual malware. The installer itself creates a program entry called outweepdines, which is actually a link to an installer that gets dropped in the app data directory of the victim's machine. The installer is password protected, but the password is hard coded in that MSI file that gets downloaded. It creates a heavily obfuscated executable that Malwarebytes detects using their trojan.crypt.misl family, which is a generic detection, they said, for any obfuscated Microsoft Intermediate Language or MSIL Trojans. And then ultimately, it drops a executable that is a combination of the Luma stealer and a additional .NET DLL library. So the current theory that I've been seeing is researchers believe this was a form of like a USB rubber ducky, basically a fake human interface device, like a keyboard, where when you plug it in, it can act like a human is typing on the keyboard, likely waited until the victim opened a web browser and then secretly behind the scenes tricked it into downloading this file that contained the malware. So Corey, like first talking point here is we have to talk about the interesting infection vector on this one. And I'm beyond the type of product it is itself. Like the fact that this was like it was a Spencer's brand, so a store brand device. It's not like some random thing you get off Amazon that's like drop shipped from a factory. Well, I'm sure it was made in a factory in China and delivered to them. But what I'm getting at is like it felt like it had a little more credibility, and the fact that you could plug it in and instantly get malware is like a major like whoa, what the heck to me.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about digital supply chain issues, being where maybe software vendors get hacked and their software gets trojanized. But this could actually be potential. I mean, this is where we get into speculation. If you're on the video, you can see what I'm highlighting, that Spencer's knows about this malicious vibrator. Whoever knew there'd be malicious vibrators, Mark. Spencer's
I've
knows
seen
about it,
enough
but
DEF CON talks that it's not
yes,
totally
we know.
out of left field.
There was a butt thing we talked about in the past. But anyways, it could be a manufacturing supply chain issue for all we know. I mean, the question comes: whoever Spencer sources this from, that company probably makes a lot of USB IoT toys. And did they put something on it? Did one of their employees decide to make extra income by, being an insider that infects the supply chain of the and added? This is not simply, you had to add software to make that USB port not just a charging port, but something that could emulate. I already forgot, was it a human interface device, a keyboard or
Yep.
something, or a storage device? Either way, that takes work in programming on the USB side of things. So it could be a supply chain hack. I do really want to know what's going on there. By the way, as a
It's
total
interesting.
aside, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead with your
I
total
was just
aside.
going to say, as a total aside, there's a person I follow, if you're watching the video, called Louis Rossman. I think we've both seen, he goes to DEF CON every year.
Yep.
He's someone that typically fights for right to repair. And, when the tractors or whatever, those big, like kind of John Deere things, wouldn't let you fix things because of software in Apple, he always fights for that. But he found this like the day it was the Reddit post and did a video on it that I think is pretty
Interesting.
funny. So check that out if you want to know more. Anyways, what were you saying, Mark?
So I've always like, so if I just got a random thumb drive that I found in the parking lot, or even one that like randomly showed up on my doorstep as like a drop shipped device, like I wouldn't go plug that in my computer. I understand you don't plug in random stuff you find, and especially things you receive unsolicited. If I went to the store and bought like a thumb drive and it was in its original packaging, like I wouldn't necessarily think twice and like plug that into a sandbox first.
Yeah.
And I understand there's a difference between like a thumb drive and like an IoT device like this, but it kind of spooks me that now I'm second guessing. Like if I go buy something, like now I have to go test it before I use it.
Well, let's say even IoT device, because it will get to the practical tip we will give for this. But even if it's not a thumb drive, even if it's something with a charging port, I don't know about you, but sometimes I buy things that need USB charging. And just because I'm sitting at my desk, rather than finding a USB wall wart, I mean, more and more devices are shipping with the freaking USB cable, but they don't give you a wall wart. So many people would just plug these charging only or assumption charging only devices just in a computer without even thinking about it. I might actually think if I bought a thumb drive, even if I bought it at a store, maybe I won't plug it right away, and maybe I'll plug it into my sacrificial computer yet. But I would be much more likely, if I bought at a store something that I presume is only charging, it feels safe. And this proves that, I mean, USB rubber ducky should have, a USB device can be anything, despite what the package says. So don't trust it. You can spoof, things that might be only charging. This proves they're not only charging. But just like you said, I would not only being bought from the store, but the fact that I don't even expect it to have a data connection. You might think, why plug it into a computer? Well, it just happens to be a convenient source for me to charge because I open things at my desk. So I'm with you. It is something you need to think about. And I think that gets
Yep.
to the practical tip, by the way. If you buy devices that are not meant to hook to computers and share pictures or media or data, don't plug them into computers at all. If the only point of that USB plug is presumably charging, use a freaking wall wart. The wall wart will become your USB condom, because if you plug it into something that goes straight into the wall, you don't have to worry about the data component of it.
USB condom, if you're not familiar with the exciting new
There's
term.
real ones too.
So exactly. USB ports, they're made up of two like power lines and two data lines. And a USB condom basically accepts anything to plug into it, but the data lines are disconnected. And so only the power lines make their way through it, meaning you can plug in something theoretically and charge it without any risk of data having a possibility of being transmitted. That is like, if you are going to plug something in, maybe it is handy to have a couple of those floating around just in case your laptop's USB port is the closest thing you have to charge your new purchase from the Spencer's Mall. But either way, like my initial assumption with this was it had to be BS. But like Malwarebytes coming out and saying, you know what, it's actually true, was a pleasant surprise from a research perspective for me. So it was interesting, very, very interesting. So Let's move on to the final story. Corey, time to put on your pirate hat. So President Biden just signed a executive order yesterday with the aim of bolstering our maritime port security, and not the security of defending us against actual pirates of the seven seas, but specifically cybersecurity. So the EO was titled Executive Order on Amending Regulations Relating to the Safeguarding of Vessels, Harbors, Ports, and Waterfront Facilities in the U.S., which is a bit of a mouthful. But basically, at a high level, it amends existing maritime rules to give the Coast Guard the authority to respond to malicious cyber activity by both requiring maritime transportation vessels, facilities, and whatever improve their cybersecurity practices, as well as instituting mandatory cyber incident reporting. So it boils down to now with this rule change, the Coast Guard has the authority to inspect and prevent, quote, any article or thing, including any data, information, network, program, system, or other digital infrastructure from moving on or off a ship or into or out of a facility in a controlled port. It also implements mandatory reporting, which this one was interesting. I'm going to read the bit from the executive order on the whole here. So mandatory reporting when, quote, evidence of sabotage, subversive activity, or an actual or threatened cyber incident involving or endangering any vessel, harbor, port, or waterfront facility, including any data, information, network, program, system, or digital infrastructure therein or thereon, shall be reported immediately to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the captain of the port or the representative. Captain of the port being the head of the Coast Guard station in that area. The one that stood out to me here was the word immediately. Like even in other areas with cyber reporting, it's usually when you've discovered a material event, sometime within 48 hours or 24 hours on the quickest. Putting this in like actual rules writing saying you need to immediately notify the FBI or CISA, I like it on the face of it, but that does feel like a little bit difficult to comply with. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that one, Corey? Like mandatory immediate disclosure of an incident. Maybe it makes sense in critical infrastructure, but I don't know.
I think maybe maritime is the specific part here, Mark, because think about the big, container vessels that come into ports every day. You're right. As a business, if you're just a normal business at a location, you need time to investigate to figure out if it really is an incident, and you'd want a little time before reporting. But I think in this case, the immediate probably is, let's say there's an incident that's discovered on a big vessel that's literally arriving at port or has arrived at port. You have limited time before they unload that crap and send it off. So I this is pure speculation on my part, Mark. I don't know this for sure, but I presume that like the maritime vessel reporting this probably isn't the one that did anything, like has some bad cyber stuff loaded up on a thing, but there's a chance that whoever they're shipping that for actually wants it immediately when the port comes in, and it might start to ship off somewhere. So maybe the immediate is so that the authorities have time to come and intercept things before they're moved from to ship off. But that's pure speculation. I agree, it's going to be very hard to do this, but if there is an excuse for why you might have to do this in a maritime situation, I assume it's like most of the ships we're talking about here bring in lots of stuff, and that stuff goes off really quickly, and I'm that idiot that's ordering crap from Temu, and I want my stuff to come in just a week and a half from China instead of 4 weeks. So I'll be irritated if they don't get it off the boat quick. By the way, I don't order crap from Temu. Be very careful. I'm just pointing out
Really?
that people
even after
want
all those Super Bowl commercials.
I didn't even watch the Super Bowl. Do you lose? I
What?
didn't even watch the halftime show or the commercials this year.
Oh man, that's
I hear
the
it was a good
commercials were top
game.
notch this day. Yeah,
I
it
hear
was
even the
it was
Usher
an
thing was
interesting
good.
game. Yep. Anyways, not a sports
There may
talk,
be
but
nothing wrong
so
with Temu, but the point is, it might just be if something's going to leave the ship, they might want to catch it before.
and the way this is written, by the way, it's also to cover the like digital infrastructure that our ports and facilities there manage as well too. So basically, you have to imagine there's a lot of electronics record keeping that goes on with maritime transportation.
For
They need to
sure.
exchange manifests, things like that. Well, I'm sure there's still a lot of like physical paper that changes hands. I would hope that, I mean, we're in the 21st century. They use a lot of digital records as well too. And I imagine that like that is a major focus of this as well. You could imagine a container ship coming in from our best friends at China, where maybe the container ship's probably fine, but maybe agents in China or something implanted something in there that then makes its way into a network owned by the maritime facility that ultimately leads to a compromise that causes disruption of that facility when China decides they
Yeah.
don't want to be friends anymore. Like that's the situation I'm painting in my head that they're trying to protect against here.
That makes sense. Yeah. So I'd
Uh,
hope the government always, when they're thinking about when to report, they're considerate of the type of business and the realities of needing time to investigate and figure things out first. But hopefully we've met a few folks in the right places and they do tend to think about these things. So maybe there really is a reason for the immediate in the Maritimes case. And even in the financial case, the financial reporting for what was it, the SEC was like 40, it was much quicker
yep.
than the month you're allowed at a business. And that makes sense too, because financial transactions happen at the speed of light. So as long as they're thinking about it and realizing that businesses are human, they need to discover and investigate, and they don't want to jump the gun. Uh, I can trust them in their timing until they prove otherwise. And I'm sure the maritime organizations will complain if it actually is too what's the word I'm looking for?
Too
Too
difficult to
quick for
comply with.
them.
There we
Yeah.
go. So there's another little interesting tidbit in here that kind of points back to that White House national cybersecurity strategy that came out in March of last year, where one of the like within one of the pillars in that strategy document, the White House was discussing how we need to find ways to help, not just like mandate down laws that you need to have mandatory security practices. Like they explicitly listed out in that strategy that they understand that a lot of these places that are critical infrastructure are running on shoestring budgets, and they don't necessarily have the money to comply with some of these regulations that come down. And so this executive order actually has a bit that helps out with that. So they're actually pledging $20 billion in funding to help ports comply with the rules that end up materializing out of this, which is nice. Like I like that they're trying to address an issue and that they're not just saying, okay, do it. And they're actually providing a little bit of funding, some of that carrot to help comply with it. Now, the Coast Guard did publish a 230-page document as their notice of proposed rulemaking around establishing like minimum cybersecurity standards for the maritime industry. I have to admit, I've not read the 230-page document because I am not that bored.
I will follow
Um,
you along and read a 50-page cybersecurity regulation document, but I agree. I would not spend the time to read a 200-page maritime related document.
yeah, especially
It's like
because
almost
there's
a
actually
short book.
it's a very long book and a very dry book because the executive order covered a little bit more than just cybersecurity. There was stuff about like fire suppression system requirements in there too. And I cannot be bothered to sift through all of that to get the meat and bones. So I will either ask ChatGPT to summarize it, maybe, or wait until someone else does, and then we can discuss the cybersecurity components of it. But either way, so this is like Corey, another step that we've seen now of addressing a specific weakness in our critical infrastructure here in the States. And it does look like the White House is putting into action some of their plans, some of their proposals that they had in that national cybersecurity strategy of addressing certain areas. Like we saw power infrastructure slowly start to be addressed, water infrastructure being addressed, transportation now as well. Like it's nice to see not just the hey, here's what we want to do, but also the action that comes out of it, including rules and funding to help comply with those rules. So who knows? Maybe at some point here in the future, our critical infrastructure in the U.S. won't be a giant block of Swiss cheese that's melting.
Yeah. I wonder if Canada, we never talked about it, I don't think, but Colonial Pipeline, remember that old infrastructure hack in the US? Apparently there was a pipeline cyber attack in Canada recently too. So I love that. Yes, I agree with you. I mean, uh, we like the White House focusing on cybersecurity the way they have, and they seem to actually be putting it in action, not just releasing the big strategy doc, but anytime you can add incentives or help, because I think even vendors, private vendors, want to do the right thing, but the reality is good security costs more money, which sometimes, if you don't have help with that, that transfers to the customers, or loss in profit. So I know maritime might be not private organizations, but being able to kind of fund or give benefits if you do the right thing or follow things in the same way they do for education with the Child Information Protection Act, follow these rules to protect kids and you get a little funding. That's a good way to make sure companies actually do some of these best practices that you're asking them to.
Yeah, agreed. I'm interested in seeing what else comes next. And I think the next area we'll probably be chatting about it will be over in Europe, as we're only months away from some of the rules for NIS2 probably manifesting and coming out with their attempts to address cybersecurity concerns in their critical infrastructure. It's interesting seeing globally all of our major countries start to really take notice and address some of these pretty gaping concerns we have with critical infrastructure. But man, if you're in the shipping industry, hey, you've got some new rules coming down and hopefully a little bit of money to make it a bit more palatable. Um, and if you don't care about security, then yar. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics or suggestions for future episode topics, you can reach out to us on Instagram at watchguard_technologies. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week.
Cool.
Catch me on
Beans.
Insta.